Negotiation teams from Israel and the United States have abandoned ceasefire talks in Qatar, that ceasefire talks for Gaza. Officials from the two countries with very close ties have left, saying Hamas was not negotiating in good faith. Israel, on the other hand, has not commented on why its negotiators left. But these latest round of talks involving mediators from Egypt and Qatar have been ongoing for over 2 weeks. Meanwhile, over 100 NGOs and aid organizations have this week expressed their deep concern over the growing hunger crisis in Gaza, the UN warning 1 in 5 children are malnourished. Let's bring in Famine researcher and executive director of the World Peace Foundation, Professor Alex Dval. It's great to talk to you. You've called for the blockade of supplies by Israel. You've called it intentional genocidal starvation. Professor Dval, I almost get the sense that, given what's happened over the past 2 years with the war on Gaza, this seems like probably the worst part of it. I don't know if there can be a worst part in a story like this, but when it involves children starving to death, more than 1,000 Palestinians being killed while looking for food, is this the final step in what is a genocide?
So I've been studying this cluster of issues of famine, conflict, genocide, war crimes for more than 40 years. And there are a couple of things that really stand out about the situation in Gaza. And the first one is this: we have to understand that starvation is not just a biological phenomenon. It's not just the phenomenon of a human being wasting away through lack of food. And this can take weeks or months for an adult. For a child, it can be much more rapid. It's also a social phenomenon. It's the degradation of society, the sundering of basic social bonds, the humiliation of people to the state where their hunger drives them to act like animals. And when a society reaches that breaking point, the harm is irreparable. The death rates escalate, and the social damage is that much greater. Now, this isn't a byproduct of what has been inflicted on the Palestinians of Gaza over the last 18 months. This is the central element of it. And the starvation that we are seeing among children is an intrinsic part of that. And it's deeply shocking. I've not seen anything quite as disturbing as this in 40 years of studying this topic.
Yeah. For those perpetrating this genocidal starvation, what I'm getting from you is that they've most certainly lost the last of their humanity, talking about the perpetrators here.
So it seems to me that the government of Israel simply doesn't care whether Palestinians live or die. The intent of their operation is to dismantle the Palestinian community in Gaza as a functioning community, and certainly as a political community. And part of the alibi for doing this, because they don't want to be condemned for having caused famine, having caused starvation, part of the alibi for this is operations like the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which are putting in food. And certainly that food is helping to keep some people alive. Not the poorest. We have no evidence at all that the rations distributed or made available at the ration stations that the GHF is running, we have no evidence that this is reaching the starving. More likely, this is being taken by the strong, by those with guns. Because even as people trek them through the wastelands and rubble that is now Gaza, they are preyed upon by armed gangs. So there is nothing that Israel is doing in any way at scale that is ameliorating the destruction that is being inflicted on Palestinian society.
And we know that the Gaza Humanitarian Aid Organization has proven to be anything but that, US and Israeli backed.
I'm sorry, I lost the connection for a moment.
Professor Dval, the Gaza Humanitarian Aid Organization has proven to be anything but.
So it's a bit like standing at the edge of a pond and throwing breadcrumbs into the water and saying you're feeding all the fish. You're just feeding the fish that can come and scrabble for that food. The 4 feeding stations are not where people are. 3 of them are in the far south. And in order for people to get there to collect rations, they need to camp in the rubble nearby. And they need to do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, these places are far away and the opening times are only advertised, an hour, 2 hours, sometimes just a few minutes before they open, and they're only open for a short period. So people cannot travel from where they are living to get there in an orderly, planned way. This is the inverse of the way that a humanitarian operation is normally run, which brings aid to the people instead of the people having to run to where the aid is. And then to get there, they have to run the gauntlet of IDF military checkpoints that quite often use live ammunition to fire at them deliberately or whatever. And so the people are faced with this terrible choice of risking your life or seeing your children die of starvation. This is not how a humanitarian operation is run.
Yeah, certainly. And you have written, Professor Dval, that if Israel wanted every child in Gaza to have breakfast tomorrow, the Prime Minister just needs to say so and it would happen.
That's correct. So just almost a year ago, there was polio in Gaza. And Israel was very alarmed about this because the polio vaccine can easily cross into Israel. And there are large Israeli communities that do not vaccinate their children against polio. And within days, Israel teamed up with the World Health Organization and they reached 95% of the children in Gaza to give them vaccination. So Israel can do it. And there is a huge aid operation of the United Nations, fully resourced, ready to roll. Many of those trucks are actually inside the perimeter of Gaza. And the Israelis will say it's up to the UN to distribute them. Well, the actual paperwork, the requirements, the checks that Israel is imposing on those trucks are so onerous, and there is no security provided that that system has been made to grind to a halt. It's not failing, it's being made to fail. And that switch can easily be turned.
Yeah, and this is also why you've written, Professor Dval, that this famine unfolding in Gaza stands out for very particular reasons compared to, because we know there are other famines happening around the world and on the African continent.
Man-made, gendered language deliberate. There are no women-made famines. And almost all of them see starvation as a weapon of war, whether that's Yemen, whether that's Syria, whether that's Myanmar, whether it's Ethiopia, whether it's Sudan. But let me compare the situation in Sudan, in and around the city of El Fasher, which has a grave famine, just as intense as what is happening in Gaza today, brought about by the brutal war and the indifference to human life of the warring parties. Now, if they were to sign a ceasefire and a humanitarian access agreement today, it would take weeks, possibly even months, for the aid to arrive and for the humanitarian infrastructure to be set up. What's different about Gaza is that could be done in a matter of days if Israel were to decide so, and it is not deciding so. And therefore, whatever culpability, whatever crimes Hamas may have committed, the finger of blame for this starvation points directly to the leadership of the government of Israel.
In terms of, because I feel like a lot of people are watching what's unfolding in Gaza and really questioning how a genocide like this is unfolding right before our eyes. And seemingly very little is being done by international organizations, watchdogs. The International Court of Justice, if you would allow me, Prof, issued a binding order last year ordering Israel to take all necessary measures to ensure the provision of humanitarian aid in Gaza in cooperation with the UN. It seems, and you've written this as well, Prof, that Israel has just ignored the order.
That was exactly the point I was going to make. This is a binding order by the highest judicial authority in the world. And what's interesting about that particular order of 28th of March last year is that there was an Israeli judge on the court, Justice Aharon Barak, former head of the High Court in Israel. He voted for it. He made it unanimous. So Israel cannot turn around and say, oh, this is some anti-Semitic conspiracy. Their own judge voted for it. And the key point here is that the Genocide Convention is the convention to prevent and punish genocide. It's not a convention to just hold those responsible to account after the event. It's not a genocide to say, oh, all these children have died, we've counted all the graves, terrible genocide has happened, let's wring our hands and say never again. It is, the purpose of that convention is to stop genocide from happening. And what the South African Ministry of Foreign Affairs did in bringing this case was that it got the International Court of Justice to say, let's set aside the question of whether there is a genocidal intent, a true genocide. There is a risk of genocide. There is a risk of destructive conditions of life where people cannot survive. And that it is an obligation on Israel and all other states in the world to prevent that from happening. And that obligation is not being honored 16 months on. And Israel and its backers are simply ignoring that simple and profound obligation articulated by the highest court in the world.
I think all of us at one stage can maybe think of a time when we were hungry, right? I doubt that many of our viewers have ever been to the point of starvation. What is that like biologically, Professor?
So biologically, what happens is that the body consumes its own fat, and then it begins to consume its own essential organs, and it does irreparable damage. So that children who go through this process, who survive, will never achieve the physical stature or the cognitive skills of their well-fed siblings. And in the case of children, it's faster, but there is what is particularly most lethal is that it exposes young children to the risks of infectious diseases, diarrheal diseases, respiratory infections that among a normal child, for a normal healthy child might be a day's illness. For a sick, malnourished child, that can lead to a lethal spiral of dehydration and wasting away and death. And it also affects the mind. If you've been with people who are starving, the eyes glaze over, and often they become crazed. Hunger means that you lose your human bearings. And these terrible scenes that we see of people scrabbling for food like animals, searching in the garbage heaps, hiding food, fighting. This is not incidental. This is central to what starvation is. And the Israelis know it. The Jewish people have been through this. I'm one of them myself. My grandparents underwent starvation. We know what it is like. Why is Israel, speaking on behalf of the Jewish people, doing this in our name? It is absolutely unacceptable. They know what it is.
And so even if there was a ceasefire today, the scars that will be left on the people who remain, the people who by sheer, I don't know what the word is, those who happen to survive, the damage has been done for generations.
Exactly. And you're right to say generations, because a young girl who is 1 or 2 years old or is unborn in Gaza, her own children will also inherit those deficits. And there's another factor here too, which is that the experience of famine, of mass starvation, is so humiliating, so degrading, that people cannot face it, cannot talk about it openly. If we take the case of the Irish famine of the 1840s, a great silence descended upon Ireland for generations after. It took 150 years almost before the Irish people as a nation could publicly acknowledge and commemorate their losses and the trauma that they had been through. And I fear that the harms inflicted on the Palestinians of Gaza are a wound that will take generations to heal. And when we talk about justice, this isn't just a matter of calling the guilty to account. This is remedying the deep harms that have been done, the truth-telling, the apologies, the restitution, the reparations, the helping people heal from these deep, deep wounds.
What a deep shame it is for all of us watching this unfold in Gaza. Professor Alex Dval, let me thank you for your time. He is an executive director of the World Peace Foundation, really helping us come to grips with what's unfolding in Palestine. Really a devastating story.